Yo, what's up, everybody? It's Monday, February 3rd. It's DFS Dude's back for an additional Deep Dive podcast. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, just felt like 49ers are up 20-10, and I'm thinking this thing's going to get out of control. They just never really got over the hump. And when they punted it back, 3rd and 5, I believe, incomplete pass, punt it back, 2010. Like, this game's over. This game's over. I felt exactly like I felt in the Houston game when Houston was up 21-0, was going to go for it on 4th down, didn't, kicked a field goal. Felt the exact same way. So NFL's in the books. I'm looking right now to see what the interest is going to be. So, listen to the podcast and hop into Scored and let me know what the interest is going to be for XFL. It starts Saturday, right? And it's going to be 10 weeks. There's 8 teams. I'm actually excited about the XFL. And I'm just going to hit on this real quick before we get into this 10-game NBA slate. But I'm a little bit excited, to be honest with you, with the XFL. Vince McMahon tried this once. I believe he took $50 million in 4 weeks and tried to make the XFL. It was exciting for a little bit, and then it died. And I've read a lot about kind of that process of the XFL and how that went, and this is way different. The only thing that I think they've made a mistake on is keeping the name of the XFL, for the simple fact that there's negative connotation that's attached to the XFL because it failed once. But this is not the XFL that we kind of know. It's completely different. I mean, they've been playing this for 2 years. They've got solid people. They've got solid coaches. They've got a whole bunch of really good coaches and coaching staffs. They've got a lot of solid players that we know. Cordell Jones, Josh Johnson went to USD and then played for Tampa Bay. They've got a lot of players that we're familiar with that have taken NFL reps we've used in daily fantasy. Guys that are really good players, just never really latched on to an NFL team. And they've got TV contracts, which they didn't have last time. They piggybacked on, at the time, the WWF. They piggybacked on their TV exposure, and they've got real contracts. So they've got money. They've got TV contracts. They've got decent players. They should be very competitive, and they've got real coaches, good coaches. So if there's interest, there are contests on both sites. If there's interest, we'll definitely throw some XFL information up, like maybe Thursday and Friday, if there's interest. But there's a big tournament on FanDuel, and I think it's only a 2-game slate for $100,000. It's a $9 entry. So FanDuel's going to try it out. We know DraftKings is trying it out. So if there's interest, let me know in Discord, and we'll definitely put some content together for you guys. So on to today. Today is a 10-game, bigger slate. There's a ton of injury news. Make sure you pay attention to the injury report on the website. Derek Grant does a really good job with this. As of now, questionable tags around D'Angelo Russell, Bertans, Evan Fournier, PJ Washington, Marcus Morris, Trey Burke, Trey Young. He's probable. DeAndre Hunter, Bruno Fernando, Derrick Rose has been ruled out. Markieff Morris, game time decision. Julius Randle's probable. Mitchell Robinson's probable. Ricky Rubio's probable. And then just this doubtful and out list with Doncic, TJ Warren, Seth Curry, DJ Augustine. Josh Richardson continues to be out. Justice Winslow, Kyrie Irving is out. Dario Saric, Aaron Baines, Frank Kaminsky, Tyler Johnson, all out. Cam Reddish, Marcus Smart, Kimball Walker all out. Alex Len out. Bembre out. Robert Williams still out. Kennard and Griffin still out. Marvin Bagley and Rashawn Holmes still out. So there is a ton of value on this slate. And as the slate really opens up, there's not only a ton of value on the slate, but there's like a ton of value and really good spots at one position. And that's the shooting guard position. I mean, there's a lot of potentially really, really interesting plays. You talk about a Karis LeVert, you talk about Devin Booker, you talk about a Ricky Rubio at the point guard position at his price tag. So there's a lot to get into on this slate. I think it's a really good slate. You know, you've got the Sacramento and Minnesota game. That was an exciting game that looked like it was a blowout. And then you've got some real default chalk that's on this slate as well. That people are gonna just turn to, right? And that's in Boston. You've got kind of this flow, right? Of this person's out, target this person. We know how the flow goes. And in Boston, that's with Kimball Walker. Kimball Walker's out, then Marcus Smart's going to get a bump. Well, Marcus Smart is out also. So that puts Jaylen Brown, it puts Gordon Hayward, and it puts Jason Tatum, who's had his minutes restriction removed, all in play in very obvious spots. The return of Enes Kanter, only 4,400. It's a slate that, Daniel Tice, 5,000. It's a slate that has some really obvious chalk. You look at Phoenix that has so many guys out. There's a lot of value there because of the minutes. So, there's value is not just a guy who's at a depreciated price tag. Value is their price on par for what their production and minutes are, their opportunity. And it goes back to the same equation, right? Minutes equal opportunity. Opportunity equals fantasy production. So there's a ton of guys on the slate that are in that spot. You talk about the point guard position, Reggie Jackson at questionable with Derrick Rose out. We know Reggie Jackson has increased the amount of minutes. The only thing I'm not liking here with Reggie Jackson is that he seems to have some soreness in his back area, and the back area is what kept him out he had a stress fracture in his spine. That's what kept him out, and he's got some soreness in his back. So if he's ruled out, it's going to kind of tip that on its head. But at 4,500 with no Derrick Rose today against Memphis, you have to like that. He'd probably be my top overall play at the point guard position, and where I'd start looking to maybe pay that position down. I really like Ricky Rubio against Brooklyn without Kyrie Irving. The shooting guard position, like I talked about, I think that right now Devin Booker is probably the number one overall shooting guard on the slate. Don't have too much interest in DeMar DeRozan at 7,900. I just think that Clippers team at full strength, you're going to have Kawhi and you're going to have Paul George on the floor and Patrick Beverly and those boys, and what they do collectively as a healthy unit. They're a very good defensive team. I'd like to look elsewhere. D'Angelo Russell's a big one. If he's going to play, I think it puts him and Bradley Beal both in play. And then I've mentioned this on the morning shoot around. I loved Karis LeVert at his price tag when he came back because Kyrie wasn't playing. And LeVert would come in off the bench, Dinwiddie would start, and LeVert would be a high usage player in that rotation off the bench. And then Kyrie comes back, Dinwiddie goes to the bench, and then you've got Dinwiddie and LeVert on the floor at the same time, and it didn't go well for LeVert. He became really an isolation player, and he looked out of control at times, just trying to create too much. I didn't like it. Consequently, his prices dropped from 4,500 to 4,100, but this is a really good matchup against Phoenix. And with no Kyrie Irving and with Dinwiddie going to start the point guard, you can see a very high usage player like Karis LeVert at 4,100, who's probably going to get 25 to 28 minutes tonight in a really good spot. So the shooting guard position is really deep. Dinwiddie leads the way at 7,100. He'll start at point guard. But Devin Booker, in my opinion, the top overall play at the position. And I could see a lot of lineups tonight in cash that are stacked with Booker and Dinwiddie. And some of this value will allow you to build different lineups by paying up in different spots and having some of the same game exposure, two chalkier game spots, but just building a little bit different for tournaments. And one of the ways you could do that would be, a Booker and a LeVert instead of Dinwiddie, or a Dinwiddie and, a Jeremy Lamb with no TJ Warren today. Lou Williams is 5,500. He's in a really good spot. So small forward position, Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward are going to lead the way there. They're going to lead the way in ownership as well. But you could take a look at a guy like Troy Brown playing against the Golden State Warriors, just getting a ton of minutes at 4,700 in a very favorable matchup. Tobias Harris is the guy, to me, I look at the small forward position that I'm not excited about, and that's because of Shake Milton. I just, you got Embiid, you've got Simmons, you've got Shake Milton, who's like getting all the hustle plays, and then kind of just a pure scoring role is what Tobias Harris has. It's a fair price at 6,500, but does he draw Jimmy Butler, and does that get, I don't know how that looks. So Tobias Harris, a small forward, in comparison, when you look at Alec Burks, if there's no D'Angelo Russell, he'll get default point guard role run at 5,100. Tim Hardaway without Doncic, without Seth Curry, he should get a little extra run at 4,500. Glenn Robinson, he'd be in line here as well if there's no D'Angelo Russell. And then Kelly Oubre, I like the combination of putting together Phoenix and Boston. I like the combination of that quite a bit. So, he's definitely in play here as well. The power forward position, I'm not big on Aldridge in this spot. I get it. The price tag is 6,800. I get he's a center going against kind of a team that's weaker in that spot. I don't mind him in tournaments. I don't like the San Antonio Spurs on this slate, and I probably will have little, if any, exposure to them. I think Jason Tatum at 7,900 will be a higher usage guy on this slate. Draymond is worth considering at 6,200. Belitza, he's seen a dip in production, but he's coming off, 3 games ago, they played at Minnesota and he had a monster game, 55 fantasy point game against Minnesota. Good matchup for him and, on this slate in that spot. Jared Allen against Phoenix, they've got DeAndre Ayton and they've got DeAndre Ayton only as a big man. The rest of it's going to be wing play. Ayton and 4 kind of guard/forward players on the floor with Ayton, and you could take a look at Jared Allen who could be in a pretty decent spot there as well. And then the center position, to me, it's a couple of guys. I can't go 9,700 for Drummond in this matchup against Valanciunas. I just can't, with all where the game is on the slate from a time standpoint, and price comparison to a Vucic going against Charlotte. To other centers that have had good games against Drummond and having Valanciunas match up against him, who's playing extremely well this season. Vucevic, like I said, against Charlotte, and DeAndre Ayton at 8,300. I really like the team stack of Booker, Oubre, Ayton, or Rubio, Booker, Ayton, something like that. So you could kind of play with that depending on how many lineups you have. But Harrell at 6,600 in this spot, probably getting run against Jakob Poeltl. It's a very fair price for Harrell. It's about a 5x price on Harrell. And Embiid is just too cheap. I say he's too cheap, but he's probably overpriced for some of the run he's got into the last 3 games. But there's no indication that he's not going to play 36 minutes. There's also no indication that he's only going to play 24 minutes. We just don't know. So, that's an interesting play as well. Embiid, DeAndre Jordan, a price tag of 5,000 against Phoenix. Bench run with no other big guys out there. How many minutes are they going to let Ayton play? How many minutes is DeAndre Jordan going to be on the floor without a true center on the Phoenix side of things? Does he play very many minutes because of that? Does he play a lot of minutes because of that? So he's a tournament play at 5,000. But for me, there's a couple. I think that there's really 4 guys that I'm considering at the moment, and that's Vucevic, Ayton, Enes Kanter at 4,400 against Atlanta, and then Thomas Bryant, 5,300 against the Warriors, and Marquise Chris as their center. It just seems like it's obvious. Right? It just seems like it's obvious. Towns is 10,000. You could give him consideration. Had a really big game against Sacramento as well. So it's a good slate. Let's get into the matchups and kind of where they boil out. But that's kind of a roundabout way, if you're taking notes, to build the player pool out of the guys that I'm thinking of to build around on this slate so far. So, Where are the high over-unders? Where are the closer spreads? Is there anything obvious from that standpoint that sticks out? And we look, 235 is the over-under, and it's a 5.5-point spread. Golden State at Washington. It's a 7-point spread with Detroit and Memphis. It's 230. I feel like Brooklyn and Phoenix at 228 should be higher than Detroit and Memphis. Minnesota and Sacramento, I feel like that could be a little higher than Detroit at Memphis. Boston and Atlanta, I feel like this could be a very competitive game, and I think that one guy that could just get lost on this slate is Trae Young. I just feel like Trae Young could get lost in the slate. I do. And there's no Kimball Walker. People are going to look at the Boston value. They're not going to look at the other side of this thing in Atlanta. And Atlanta is not at full strength either. There's no Alex Len. There's no Bimbre in this one. Trae Young could be very high usage. Collins could be a guy that gets lost in the slate as well. Those two guys could be very contrarian plays. And I feel like this game could be, it's a 5.5-point spread. And I feel like this game could be close throughout. And I feel like that over-under might be a little low. I feel like the over-under in the San Antonio Clipper game might be a little high. It's a 9.5-point spread. And that's kind of the highest over-unders on the slate. The implied totals, the highest implied total on the slate, Washington 120.3, Memphis 118.8, the Clippers 118.5. Like I said, that's a 9.5-point spread with that Clipper game. Boston with a 116.5, Brooklyn 115, Sacramento 115. So this is a slate that's going to see some action. A couple of things to look at. The Golden State Warriors have an implied total of 114.8. They average 106.1 for the season. It's 8.5 points higher, and they're at a 2.5 as far as pace goes, plus 2.5. So it'll be an up-paced game for them, and I think that game is going to have a lot of fantasy production in it. And I think Draymond Green is a guy that could be a staple in some tournament lineups tonight, because of the fact that we've seen over the last 3 games, the assist numbers have been back and they've been through the roof. And then if you're going to take D'Angelo Russell out of this mix, I think that Draymond Green kind of default runs this offense with Alec Burks. Those would be the 2 biggest beneficiaries, in my opinion. Rankings and matchups, the point guard position, Ricky Rubio in a really good spot. De'Aaron Fox, Elfrid Payton, Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Smart has been ruled out. So, you could look at a Brad Wanamaker and then Patrick Beverley. Those guys are in the best overall matchups. From a usage standpoint, Trae Young leads the way here, 37%, averaging 34.9 minutes a season. He's plus 6.3 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks, averaging 50.2 fantasy points per game for the season, 56.5 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. D'Angelo Russell, he's at plus 4.5 over the last couple of weeks. If he plays today, it's a really good spot. Just an up-paced game that I think is going to be pretty exciting. The, usages kind of start to go downhill when you get past Morant and Fox. They're right at 30. Shooting guard position, matchup standpoint, Damian Lee is a guy that doesn't get talked about very much. He leads the way from a matchup standpoint. Red Velvet, he's in the mix. Colin Sexton, definitely in the mix as well. There's just a tremendous amount of value on this slate, and there's not a ton of payoff spots. We are absent an Anthony Davis, LeBron James, a Giannis, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They're not in the best of games where you'd want to, pay up for one of those 2 guys. I could definitely see using Kawhi today as a pay-up spot to be different, but there is a tremendous amount of solid value. Bradley Beal is he's the main pay-up spot on the slate. You look at price tags overall on the slate. Beal's 10.5, Kawhi Leonard's 10.1, Towns is 10,000, and Trae Young is 9,600. Those are FanDuel price tags. Under 10,000, Ben Simmons playing well, Joel Embiid playing well, Booker in a sweet spot, Vucevic in a sweet spot, Butler in an okay spot. These guys are in the 8,000. So there's a lot of value, and I could talk about some of these guys at 3,500 that are in super good spots, like a Doug McDermott. And you look at a Doug McDermott with no TJ Warren, who's played as many as 29 minutes, went through a stretch of time here before Oladipo came back where he's playing 23, 22, 25, 23. Last two games, only 16 minutes and only 11 and 10 fantasy points. But without a TJ Warren today, does McDermott get a few extra minutes of run at 3,500? In deep format tournaments, I don't mind taking a stab with him. There's just a tremendous amount of value. And when you look at matchups, you can fit a lot of these better matchups in your lineups today because there's a lot of value that's in a pretty good spot. Oubre leads the way at the small forward position. Kawhi Leonard, Gordon Hayward, and Andrew Wiggins, all in really good spots, really good matchups, all playing more than 32 minutes. Every single one of them over the last 2 weeks is averaging more fantasy points than they've averaged for the course of the year, with Kawhi Leonard at 11.5, averaging 60.8 over the last 2 weeks. We know that's taken a hit since Paul George has come back, but Kawhi Leonard still playing at a very high level. And if you look, 60.3 against Orlando, took the night off against Sacramento with, everything that happened with Kobe, came back and played only 23 minutes against Minnesota, but put up 43.2 fantasy points in those 23 minutes, scoring 31 real points, 31, 6, and 4. So, is that the pay up spot? Is Kawhi Leonard the pay up spot? That San Antonio Clipper game is a very difficult game for me to get excited about. Like I always say, you kind of want to have some piece of that last game just to kind of take you up the leaderboard a little bit more and give you a chance to take something down. So, that's kind of figuring that out for me is a little bit difficult on this slate because of all of the value that's in other spots and the other pay up spots than this game just being a really big spread. So at the power forward position, matchup standpoint, Draymond Green, he leads the way. He's plus 5.5 from a fantasy point perspective over the last 2 weeks, 29.5 to 35.0. Washington is terrible against power forwards. He's going to play a slash role in this one, playing about 29.1 minutes this season. 6,200 on FanDuel, 6,500 on DraftKings. Like him a ton. Jason Tatum, another guy in a really good spot, playing about 33.5 minutes. He's plus 2.4 over the last 2 weeks, averaging 39 fantasy points per game over the course of the season, averaging 41.4 over the last 2 weeks in a really good matchup where there's usage to be had because of the absence of Marcus Smart and Kemba Walker. Talking about the center position now, Jan Mahamini listed as a center playing power forward. They're running this new lineup out there. He's 4,300 on each side, playing about 22 minutes. Marquise Chris, 5,500, 5,000 on FanDuel. Joel Embiid, the usage rate of 30.7. It's a really good matchup going against Miami. And then Valanciunas and Ayton and Vucevic round out the rest. And, you look at usage, Vucevic leads the way there. You look at minutes, and Ayton leads the way there. You look at over the past 2 weeks, all three of them are pretty much a +2 over the last couple weeks. And price compared to production, Ayton at 38.7, he's averaging right about 4.5 times his price tag. 41.7 for Vucevic, same thing, right around 3.75 to 4.25x his price tag. Valanciunas, he's about 5x his price tag and looks like he's probably the best buy of the three, but goes against Andre Drummond. And that doesn't mean you can't have a good game against Andre Drummond. Jared Allen certainly has had 2 really good games in the last week and a half against Andre Drummond. So that's kind of that. Bench players from a minute standpoint, Buddy Hield, he's going to play 30 minutes off the bench. Lou Williams, he plays 30 minutes off the bench. Bertans, 30 minutes off the bench. Burks and Harrell are playing about 30 minutes off the bench. And of those guys, Lou Williams with a 30.7 usage rate in a really good spot against the Spurs. And he plays kind of that hybrid role, 5,500 on FanDuel, averaging 33 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. almost 6x on that. That is exactly 6x on his price tag on FanDuel. It's exactly 5x on his price tag on DraftKings. So, definitely consideration. And then there's LeVert. It's not the best of matchups, but we know that Phoenix is going to be deprived quite a few players on that roster. We know LeVert moving to a bench role, and then with Dinwiddie moving to a starting role from a bench role, that opens it up for LeVert to kind of dominate that role coming off the floor. So those are the matchups, and right in line with some of the guys I'm already interested in. Where I kind of rank it out here today at the point guard position, if Reggie Jackson is going to play, it's really hard for me not to say that he's 1 or 2 on this list. Ricky Rubio, he's upgraded to probable, and it's really hard for me to say that like Reggie Jackson and Ricky Rubio aren't kind of 1A, 1B. And Trae Young to me is the 1C, right? Like those are the 3 guys that I really want to get the most amount of exposure to at the point guard position. And that really has to do with a couple of things. Trae Young, because I think he can get lost on this slate just by the way people are going to want to build lineups. And I just, I think people will focus on loading their lineups with Boston. I think that there's a lot of people that play tournaments that will stack the early games up and then they put a seatbelt on and try to hold on. But, outside of that, people are going to kind of default load up Boston. I can see, Ricky Rubio being extremely popular today. I can see Boston being extremely popular today. Spencer Dinwiddie being popular today. So Trae Young, I like him because I think we might get him lower owned. But Trae Young, Reggie Jackson, and Ricky Rubio are the 3 that I really want to play. And if for some reason Reggie Jackson is ruled out, then I would slide over to Colin Sexton and De'Aaron Fox. I think Brogdon is another guy that can be low owned. That's in a good spot at 6,500. I would throw him in my pool, and then I'd round it out. With either De'Aaron Fox or John Morant. Those are the kind of where I'd round it out with at the point guard position. Looking at shooting guard and where I've got guys ranked there. I love Devin Booker. And look, it's the same game. I'm not going to play Booker and Rubio in the same lineup together. And I think Booker actually gets a little bump down if Rubio's going to play. And I would put Dinwiddie as 1. We have to wait and see what happens with D'Angelo Russell. But, I would put Russell in that mix. I would put Buddy Hield in that mix. And then there's just a lot of value beyond that you could consider, and it's going to be about how do you want to build a pay up and a pay down. Do you want to pay up for 2 spots at the point guard position? So it'll be kind of how you want to build that. But the value plays there. LeVert, Lamb, Damian Lee would become an extremely good play if Russell is out. Langston Galloway, you've got to talk about him, especially without Derrick Rose there. If Reggie Jackson is to get ruled out, you would talk about a Langston Galloway and a Bruce Brown. Bradley Beal will be the guy that kind of gets overlooked as a pay-up spot at 10-5. So, the build today is going to be extremely, and we're going to walk through a couple of builds after I wrap up these rankings. But that's what I'm thinking from the shooting guard position. Small forward, 1 and 2 are Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward, default. Just default. It's too good of a spot. There's no pay-ups here. I don't have a problem stacking them together. I don't have a problem, stacking Brown, Hayward, and Tatum. Have no problem with that at all. Tim Hardaway Jr. at 4,500, I think, is the guy who gets maybe lost in the shuffle. But again, we're talking about a lot of guys in the slate, 5,000 and below, that are just in really good spots. Glenn Robinson will get extra run if Russell is out, so pay attention to that. Alec Burks will get a ton of run if Russell is ruled out. So, we've got to pay attention to that. Oubre is the guy that I wouldn't mind giving a bump to and maybe playing over Booker now that Rubio is probable, because Oubre can do some other stuff. He can block shots, so we know there's a little bit of upside there, maybe for some bonus points. He will get some rebounds. He can get some steals, and then we know he can score. And Brooklyn will turn the basketball over. And, so steals, fast break points. It's an up-tempo game. Oubre, a good perimeter player who can knock the three down, do the run and gun stuff. So I do like him. It's a good price tag at 6,700. If you're building multiple lineups, I may build one where I have Brown and Hayward, and then maybe have Oubre and Brown, and then Oubre and Hayward. And then, maybe you mix in Hardaway with them as well, and you got, Brown, Hayward, Brown and Hardaway, Hayward, Hardaway, Oubre, Hardaway. I'd kind of build that out that way, and then I would throw Glenn Robinson in that mix as well if Russell gets ruled out. So that's kind of how I've got that. And then taking a deep dive into it, I could see a scenario where you could pay up at some other spots and then just fade Brown and Hayward, thinking that some other players are going to give you more production than a Brown or Hayward, and you could save money at the small forward spot by possibly going with Troy Brown and taking a deep dart with Doug McDermott, or playing Hardaway and Brown together, or even playing Hardaway and Robinson together if Russell is ruled out. So that's a small forward position. The power forward position, it's an ugly spot. I love Julius Randle against Cleveland. I think John Collins can get lost in this mix of value. I would not have a problem stacking up Trae Young and John Collins together. Kawhi Leonard is 10-1. I get it, but you have to understand the risk that you're taking when you're playing Kawhi Leonard. He only plays 23 or 24 minutes. And like I said, he put up 40-plus fantasy points in 23 minutes the other night, but that's only 4x on his price tag. And if Trae Young goes for 70 at 9,800 and you have rostered Kawhi and he goes for 45 at 10-1, you're not taking anything down. You have a chance to cash, but you can't miss on a 10-1 guy. He's got to return you close to value. You need 50 out of him. So, Kawhi I'm a little less high on. I do think there's some value to also look at with Kleber, with Bertans, who's getting a lot of minutes, with Jared Allen at 6,200, with Eric Pascal and Omari Spellman if Russell gets ruled out. But I really like Duambier, and I really like Wood. So, I think people will have a little exposure to Bam, but, I like Randall a lot. I like Sabonis a lot. Tice is another one of these Boston guys I can see people loading up. But power forward is kind of the mess, and we'll kind of get a little further into that when I kind of go through a couple of mock builds. Marquise Chris at 5,000. I'm just not a fan of this play. Enes Kanter at 4,400 in comparison. Thomas Bryant at 5,300 in comparison. DeAndre Ayton at 8,300 with no real big men. Brooklyn's just not good against big guys. I can really see an active DeAndre Ayton. I just know that I trust my eyes sometimes. Sometimes the best research you can do is just to watch games. It really is. Sometimes I've thought about that like 3 or 4 times in the last 4 or 5 days. Just watching games, and I should just tweet out that sometimes the best research is just to watch games. What your eyes see. He's just so active. Ayton is so motivated. And then you have to take into consideration there's no Saric, there's no Kaminsky, there's no Baines. They just signed this kid on a 2-way contract. He played 7 minutes yesterday. I mean, who else is going to get run for them at the center spot? You can see 36 to 38 minutes out of him tonight, possibly. So let's take, that's kind of the slate as a whole. right? And where I'm at, what I'm thinking. Let's kind of take a look at some of the guys that I like and how we can kind of build something out. A guy that I haven't mentioned that I'm going to talk about who's in consideration here, who is another guy lost on the slate because of other value, and that's Shake Milton at 4,400. 24.8 against Boston in 29 minutes. 44 against Atlanta in 35 minutes. 24.3 against the Lakers in 25 minutes. And you look, and it's every statistical category, right? 4 rebounds, 5 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 assists, 3 steals, 1 steal, 1 steal, 1 steal. I mean, he's not just doing one thing. He's very active on the floor, and maybe one of the best basketball names I've ever heard, Shake Milton. I mean, Shake. So he's in consideration today. I don't mind using Shake Milton. Against Miami, I'm not sure that the upside is there like it was against Atlanta, but it's a guy you can continue to watch and sprinkle in. So, what is with some of these guys I like, and let's just try to see what we can squeeze in here with starting with Trae Young at the point guard, right? Let's just say Trae Young, he's going to play, right? He's been upgraded probable. You take a look at the game log. Outside of this last game against Dallas, 12, 6, and 1 in 26 minutes. 38 against Philly and 72 fantasy points. 38 minutes, 45 points against Washington, 71 fantasy points. 33 minutes, 26 points, 16 assists against Oklahoma City for 54. It's 67. He's just been on this unbelievable run of 50-plus point outings, right? There are a couple of duds mixed in. A 16.7 will kill you. 32.9 would not help you at 9,600. But I just think that there's enough uncertainty around him. I think there's a game time decision designation on him. He's 9,600. And the drive-by research puts Boston players on a silver platter for you. Don't do any research. There's no Kimball Walker. Oh, yeah, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum. And who are they playing? They're playing against Atlanta. And so many times, this happens a lot with baseball, right? A lot with baseball. Everybody will be on one team because a certain pitcher is going for that team who's a gas can, and people, they know this guy's a gas can. I'm going to load up this team tonight. And when the first inning's over, the other team has put up 6 runs. Damn, how did I get no exposure to the other side of it? And that's the point, right? Where there's a very chalky spot, right? You have to look at it from like 4 and 5 moves ahead, stepping outside the box. So if there's a very chalky spot, then there are injuries. And if there's injuries, there's usually an influence on lesser priced players to get an increased minutes. And there's the rule. Minutes equal opportunity, opportunity equals production. And everybody defaults on that spot. Okay, but let's talk about it from this standpoint. And you hear me say this all the time. If you're targeting some players in a game that maybe has an iffy spread but a high over-under, right? And you're saying, I need this game to stay close. And if this game is going to stay close, then who is going to influence that on the other side of it? And oftentimes that leads to very low-owned plays with guys in very good spots. And that's how I feel about Trae Young. There's a lot of factors surrounding him. And you can't have Boston go in and blow out Atlanta and expect a monster game out of the chalky position of Gordon Hayward, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. You need that game to be fun, entertaining, close, and a lot of points scored. And if that's going to happen, Trae Young's going to have a solid basketball. He's got to score 30 points tonight. So I'm big on Young. at 9,600. I'm also big on Young because I think we can pay up like this in 3 spots today with the other value there. If Reggie Jackson is going to play, there's no Derrick Rose. Reggie Jackson's been a really good player in this league for a very long time. Ricky Rubio, there's no Tyler Johnson. You look at Rubio, and when healthy, he's playing 30 minutes at 5,500. We've seen 65-point upside. Just had 65.1 fantasy points in 35 minutes, 25, 8, and 13 against the Knicks. Is this the same type of spot? No, but it's close. It's very close. You look at Orlando, he had 11, 7, and 10. So, he didn't play yesterday. He's probable today. They're short. And that's kind of where I would start the first lineup build because I know there's a couple of guys I can go down here from. So I'm going to go Rubio. Look at the shooting guard position. Default chalk here is Spencer Dinwiddie. It's Dinwiddie, right? Let's just load Dinwiddie up. The other guys that I like that are in really good spots, the shooting guard position, there's some really good value here. Buddy Hield's 5,800. Bruce Brown, if you're not going to play Reggie Jackson, or if Reggie Jackson is ruled out, I think Bruce Brown at 4,000 makes a ton of sense. We've seen Bruce Brown in this spot this season. And I think he makes a ton of sense as a really good value play. So if we load, Bruce Brown up, we're kind of talking about Reggie Jackson possibly being held out. And let me just look and see on our news feed here. Is there any recent news in the last hour or so? He still remains questionable to play today. Could be in line for a start without Derrick Rose. And if he starts at 4,500, it's going to be very difficult not to play him over Rubio. So that's kind of problem one to figure out. So let's leave point guard 2 open. We've got Trae Young. We've got Dinwiddie. Let's look at small forward. Let's just say you wanted to go in here and you want to follow the chalk. And you want to run Brown and Hayward. Move on to power forward. At the power forward spot, to me, my favorite play is at 6,200 on FanDuel, and it's Draymond Green. I have to tell you, I feel like it's chasing points just a little bit, but this is a Draymond type game. There's going to be some shit talking. Washington talks, they run their mouth a lot. Draymond likes that. You look at the rebounding. You look at the bigs. You look at the mismatch between Draymond and the other guys that are on the floor with him for Washington. Bertans, Thomas Bryant's really a center. You think Jan Mahamini is going to bully Draymond Green to power forward spot? I don't. Think Jan Mahamini can cover Draymond Green in the perimeter? Draymond might knock a couple threes down? Maybe. Like Draymond a lot here. And then the center position, I think Towns is in a decent spot. I think Embiid is in a decent spot. I love Ayton. And then there's Thomas Bryant at 5,300. So if we start at the top and we load up Towns, we still have, it looks like a small amount of money to spend. 4,600 left on FanDuel, right? We're on FanDuel. Okay. Let's talk about point guard number 2. Let's say Reggie Jackson starts. Reggie Jackson starts. At his price tag, it's very hard to fade him in this matchup. He's 4,500. Plug him in. Shooting guard position. You've got kind of a choice here, right? Bogdanovich is 4,900. And I've talked about with Sacramento, if you watch Sacramento play, they're kind of closing the game out with this small lineup of Bjelica, Bogdanovich, Fox, Hield, and Harrison Barnes. Look at the minutes for Bogdanovich. Coming off a game where he just scored 23 points against Oklahoma City, and 15 against the Clippers. The Laker game, they got blown out. Nobody played well. Throw it out the window. But he scored at least 10 points prior to that, 10 real points, in 7 of the last 8 games. He doesn't have the assist numbers like he had last year, but he's 4,900. Other guys to look at, is Russell in or is Russell out? If Russell's out, Damian Lee at 4,500. He's right there. Karis LeVert, you can tag team Dinwiddie and LeVert together like you've got Brown and Hayward. LeVert, I think, is in for a pretty good spot. Or you can get another Boston guy with Javonte Green, who I think is going to get some run tonight. So, there are pay down spots here, and you're not selling yourself short because of the situation and the exposure. 5,500 for Lou Williams, fit him in. 5,100 for Oladipo, probably play 24 minutes tonight. But let's plug in, just keeping it, in line with the guys that I really like here at the shooting guard position. Bruce Brown is probably who I would pair up Reggie Jackson with. And we can play with this a little bit, but let's throw Bruce Brown in at 4,000. Assuming Reggie Jackson starts, Rose is already out. We know they've got a litany of guys who are out as well. They've got more bigs than really perimeter guys. So we could bump up Jackson to, if he's still on a minutes limit, we can bump up to Rubio or somewhere else. But let's throw Bruce Brown in there, right? Power forward spot. It's an ugly spot. It's an ugly spot. I don't like the power forward spot today. But you've got Tice at 5,000. You've got Christian Wood at 4,400. Let's talk about Christian Wood. The minutes are inconsistent, but when he gets minutes, he's over a point per minute fantasy player. He's 4,400. I can't pronounce this guy's name. That's excuse me for the pause. But Hashimura is supposed to be back today. He hasn't played since mid-December. He may get on the floor tonight. Find out he's going to play 25 minutes tonight at 4,000. Definitely in play. So there's a ton of guys here that you could pay down for as well, especially if Bertans is going to be out. You're going to hear Humera is going to play 25 minutes tonight at 4,000. He's in play, right? So you can see there's just a ton of value on this slate. And that's with us paying all the way up for Towns. Let's go to Ayton, right? So we go down to Ayton, who I just thinks in a smash spot. We've got a lot more money to spend. And let's talk about, let's start pairing this up. Let's remove Hayward, and let's throw in Tim Hardaway or Troy Brown. You could throw either one of those two guys in. Let's go Hardaway at 4,500. So we've got Ayton, we've got Trae Young, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jaylen Brown, Tim Hardaway, Draymond, and Ayton. Point guard number 2. Love Ricky Rubio. Throw him in. Shooting guard number 2. Buddy Hield coming off the bench, playing a lot of minutes, just smashed in this spot a week ago. 5,800. Let's throw him in. Power forward. Jared Allen. I think he's in a really good spot. 6,200. So you got a lineup here that goes Young, Rubio, Dinwiddie, Hield, Brown, Hardaway, Green, Allen, Ayton. You could start changing this out in many different ways. The other thing you can do, and we'll do this one last exercise before we get out of here, and that is let's just pay down at the point guard position. So if you load up Rubio 5,500, good spot. You load up Reggie Jackson 4,500, good spot, starting. Small forward, we'll just default right now Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward. Power forward. Let's move to center actually. Like Ayton a lot. Could start with Towns because he's the most expensive guy and kind of build out from there. But if we build around that core of those 5 guys, we got $6,600 left, right? We talk about the power forward position. Jared Allen, 6,200. Daniel Tice, 5,000. Sabonis, 8,100. And Bam, 8,100. But let's get some combination of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And Gordon Hayward, look, I'm more partial to Jaylen Brown on this slate because I believe if you look at all the numbers, Gordon Hayward has a better experience and produces more fantasy production with Kemba Walker than he does without. So if let's get a stack here of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Okay, we've got $6,300 left. Let's pay up. Let's pay up for Bradley Beal. We're at $4,900. We know the value plays that we really like that we could plug in here. At the shooting guard spot, we like Karis LeVert a ton. We'll get some exposure with LeVert. He's $4,100. The small forward position, I've talked about many guys here. Burks, $5,100. Let's assume that Russell is out. We want to roll Burks in. We've got $5,600 left to get a power forward. And in that price range, let's say you still wanted to get Draymond. You've got $4,500 left for your small forward, and there's 2 guys we've talked about, Glenn Robinson and Tim Hardaway. Obviously, Robinson will get consideration if Russell is out, but let's just throw Hardaway in. So now you're looking at Rubio, Jackson, Beal, LeVert, Brown, Hardaway, Tatum, Green, and Towns. Who else do we like at center? We like Ayton. He's 8,300. You throw Ayton in there. Who would you upgrade? You can upgrade a whole bunch of people. You could actually upgrade Hardaway straight to Gordon Hayward. You cannot. I apologize. You could upgrade LeVert. Let's see who you can upgrade LeVert to. You could upgrade LeVert to Buddy Hield. Right? So you can play with this thing. And that's what you want to do when you build tournament lineups. You want to play with it around these guys that we like, constantly paying up in different spots and constantly moving around the way you build to be different. I'll be back tomorrow. Have fun on the slate. It's a really good slate. Pay attention to the injury report. Always hop into Discord and ask questions. Until tomorrow, be cool, keep it cashing. Peace out.